Catherine Evans had once known a life filled with warmth, laughter, and promise. Now, in a modest apartment in a small Midwestern town, the chill of despair had seeped into every corner of her existence. At 42, she carried not only the burden of raising her 6-year-old son Mikey, alone, but also the deep emotional scars of a once happy marriage that had crumbled under the weight of neglect and betrayal. Her ex-husband, Victor Reynolds, who had once been the center of her world, had abandoned her, leaving behind nothing but a tattered apartment and a bank balance so meager that it barely covered the rising costs of living. Every creak of the old floorboards and every faded photograph on her walls was a stark reminder of those brighter days when her laughter filled a home brimming with love. Now, the only sound greeting her each morning was the relentless ticking of a worn-out clock and the heavy silence of abandonment. The final blow had come on an otherwise ordinary day. After a grueling shift at St. Luke's Hospital, where she had labored as a nurse's assistant, Catherine received devastating news during a brief, sterile meeting in the fluorescent-lit break room. The manager, with an air of cold indifference, handed her a termination letter, a letter bearing the simple but soul-crushing words, "Effective immediately." In that moment, all the fragile security and hope she had built over years crumbled. With Mikey's innocent eyes watching her every move, she felt the crushing reality. She had nothing left. The safe haven of her past life was gone, and all that remained were scattered bills, neglected dreams, and a gnawing fear for her son's future. That night, in the dim light of her cramped kitchen, Catherine sat alone at a battered table surrounded by unpaid bills and memories of better times. The silence was deafening. Every tick of the clock echoed the uncertainty of tomorrow. In the midst of her despair, her gaze fell upon a crumpled piece of paper taped to the refrigerator, a job advertisement that shone like a beacon in the darkness. The words, printed boldly in unadorned letters, read, "High-paying live-in caregiver needed for paralyzed millionaire. Dedication, confidentiality, and loyalty required. Immediate start." The opportunity, as surreal as it seemed, promised not only financial stability, but also the possibility to rebuild her shattered life. Even though the prospect of caring for a paralyzed man in a lavish mansion seemed worlds away from her own modest reality, the desperate need to provide for Mikey compelled her to consider it. With her heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of fear, desperation, and a fragile spark of hope, Catherine picked up the phone and dialed the number on the ad. Her voice trembled as she accepted the invitation for an interview. Deep within, she clung to the belief that perhaps this opportunity, however unlikely, could be the turning point she so desperately needed. The decision to answer that call was not made lightly. It was born of a fierce determination to fight for her future and to reclaim even a sliver of the dignity that had been so brutally stripped away. The next morning, as the gray light of early dawn filtered through her threadbare curtains, Catherine dressed in her most modest yet neat outfit, a simple blouse paired with a worn pair of faded jeans, and set out on the bus to the outskirts of Chicago, where the mansion was located. Every bump along the highway, every scene passing by the window, was a bittersweet reminder of the stark contrast between the life she now led and the opulent world that awaited her. The landscape shifted from industrial outskirts to pockets of serene suburban life, each view intensifying her sense of both loss and the promise of renewal. Arriving at the mansion, Catherine was immediately struck by the imposing exterior. Towering iron gates, meticulously trimmed hedges, and an elegant facade of stone and glass painted a picture of wealth and refinement that had once seemed so distant. Yet beneath this veneer of luxury, she sensed an undercurrent of isolation, a place where genuine warmth and true humanity might be as scarce as the sincere connections she yearned for. Greeted by a discreet attendant who gave her a cursory glance before leading her through a labyrinth of opulent corridors, Catherine was ushered into a tastefully decorated sitting room. The air here was perfumed with a subtle blend of expensive cologne and fresh flowers, a sensory reminder of a world that was both enchanting and intimidating to her. It was in that elegant room that she met Victor Reynolds, the paralyzed millionaire for whom she was being considered as a caregiver. Confined to a sleek, custom wheelchair, Victor's presence was as commanding as it was melancholic. His icy blue eyes and stern, cool demeanor betrayed a lifetime of loss and isolation, and his every word carried the weight of a man who had built an empire only to see it crumble into loneliness. Their initial conversation was clinical and measured. Victor's questions, direct and laced with a skeptical edge, tested her resolve. Catherine answered each query with the quiet determination of someone who had nothing left to lose, her voice steady even as memories of past hurts and betrayals swirled in her mind. When Victor finally offered her the job with a curt handshake and a terse nod, Catherine left the mansion with mixed emotions, a tentative relief at the prospect of financial stability and a deep, gnawing uncertainty about the life that awaited her in this strange new world. As the bus carried her back to her small town later that day, images of the mansion and the enigmatic, sorrowful look in Victor's eyes replayed in Catherine's thoughts. The job was a gamble, a leap into an unfamiliar world of opulence and rigid routines, but it also represented a beacon of hope, a chance to reclaim her life and secure a future for Mikey. Amidst the swirling chaos of emotions and the relentless ticking of the clock back in her cramped apartment, Catherine silently vowed to embrace this opportunity, no matter how daunting it appeared. Little did she know that this decision would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would test her resilience, challenge her notions of dignity, and ultimately lead her to discover the transformative power of compassion and connection. The next morning, Catherine awoke with a heavy yet determined heart. The chill of her modest apartment in her small Midwestern town still lingered, but today she was resolved to take the next step. Clad in her simplest, most neat attire, a modest blouse and faded jeans, she boarded a bus bound for the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. The change in scenery, from the familiar quiet of her hometown to the vibrant energy of a southern metropolis, filled her with a cautious optimism. As the bus rumbled along the highway, she gazed out at the changing landscapes, from industrial stretches to verdant suburban pockets, and each passing scene reminded her that the world was vast, and perhaps, just perhaps, a new beginning awaited her. Upon arriving in Atlanta, Catherine was immediately struck by the grandeur of her destination. No longer was it Chicago with its towering skyscrapers and familiar urban rhythm. Instead, she found herself before a magnificent mansion nestled in an exclusive suburban enclave of Atlanta. The mansion's exterior was imposing, a testament to wealth and refinement, with its soaring iron gates, meticulously trimmed hedges, and a facade of polished stone and glass that gleamed under the soft morning light. This splendid estate, so far removed from her own humble reality, exuded both beauty and an unmistakable aura of isolation, as if it were a palace built for solitude rather than celebration. A courteous staff member greeted Catherine at the door, and after a brief but scrutinizing glance at her modest appearance, she was led through a series of elegant corridors. The interior of the mansion was equally impressive. Wide, echoing hallways lined with exquisite artwork and soft, ambient lighting that cast gentle shadows on polished marble floors. Every detail, from the faint scent of expensive cologne mingling with fresh flowers to the quiet hum of the air conditioning, spoke of a world that Catherine had only ever dreamed of being a part of. Yet, beneath the opulence, she sensed an undercurrent of loneliness, a hidden void that even such luxury could not dispel. Eventually, Catherine was ushered into a spacious, tastefully decorated office where she would meet the man whose care she was to provide. Seated behind a large mahogany desk, Victor Reynolds appeared. Even confined to a custom-built wheelchair, his presence was undeniably commanding. Dressed in a crisp, tailored suit that emphasized his status, despite his physical limitations, Victor's icy blue eyes and carefully guarded expression betrayed a lifetime of sorrow and isolation. His voice was measured and cool as he began the interview. "You understand," he said, "that this job requires more than mere physical care. It demands patience, dedication, and the ability to see beyond appearances." Catherine met his gaze steadily, her own voice firm, despite the swirling doubts within. "I understand, sir. I have spent years caring for those in need, and I believe every person deserves respect." For a moment, the tension in the room seemed to hang in the air as Victor's expression flickered ever so slightly, a hint of interest, or perhaps vulnerability. But then his features hardened once more. Without further ado, he offered her the position with a curt handshake and a brief nod that left no room for negotiation. As Catherine left the office, the weight of the mansion's grandeur and the cold, distant manner in which Victor had spoken left her with conflicting emotions, a surge of relief at the possibility of financial stability and a profound, gnawing uncertainty about the life into which she was about to step. On the ride back by bus, Catherine's mind was filled with vivid images of the mansion and the enigmatic expression in Victor's eyes. The opportunity before her was a gamble, a plunge into a world of rigid routines and opulence that was entirely alien to her, yet it glowed like a beacon of hope in the darkness of her recent despair. She recalled the soft echo of the termination letter, the relentless ticking of that old clock back home, and the overwhelming fear of losing everything dear to her, especially little Mikey. Now, she clutched onto the hope that this new job might offer a way out, a chance to reclaim her dignity and secure a future for her son. As the bus rumbled through the countryside, Catherine reflected on the enormity of the change she was about to embrace. Every mile took her farther from the painful memories of her past and closer to an uncertain future, yet one filled with possibility. She recalled the faces of those who had overlooked her, the cold indifference she had been forced to endure, and the quiet determination that had always burned within her despite it all. In that introspective silence, she silently vowed to herself and to little Mikey that she would not be defeated by the hardships that had once seemed insurmountable. The arrival at the mansion marked the beginning of a new chapter in Catherine's life, a chapter filled with both hope and trepidation. Stepping out of the bus onto the cool pavement of an unfamiliar neighborhood, she felt a mixture of awe and apprehension as she approached the mansion's grand entrance. The imposing iron gates opened to reveal a world of luxury and refinement that contrasted so sharply with the modest life she had known. Though every step forward was laden with uncertainty, Catherine pressed on, driven by a steadfast resolve to seize this opportunity. Deep inside, she believed that by embracing this new role, she might not only secure a future for Mikey, but also rediscover the dignity and self-worth that had long been stripped away. With each step into that opulent world, Catherine felt the pulse of both fear and hope in equal measure. The mansion, resplendent with its intricate stone carvings and expansive sunlit rooms, stood as a symbol of everything she had lost and everything she hoped to regain. In that moment, the promise of a fresh start outweighed the daunting challenges ahead. Little did she know that the path she was about to tread would lead her to confront not only the hardships of her past, but also the hidden depths of a man whose own journey of loss and transformation was only just beginning. And so, with the soft hum of the mansion's corridors echoing behind her, Catherine stepped forward into a future that was as uncertain as it was filled with promise. As winter's chill began to seep through the grand corridors of the mansion, Catherine immersed herself in the demanding routine of her new role. Every morning, She rose before dawn to prepare for another day filled with precise tasks, assisting Victor Reynolds with his personal care, managing his medications, and ensuring that every detail of his day was attended to. The opulent mansion, with its vast marble halls and silent, echoing passageways, now served as both her workplace and the crucible where her inner strength was tested. Despite the physical exhaustion and the constant reminder of her humble origins in this world of luxury, Catherine found herself determined to excel, not merely to survive, but to reclaim the dignity that had been so brutally stripped from her. Victor, confined to his custom-built wheelchair, maintained a strict regimen. His days were punctuated by curt commands and critical observations that left little room for warmth or affection. Yet, as the weeks passed, Catherine began to notice subtle cracks in his impenetrable facade. In the quiet moments between routine care, she observed a faint softening in his icy blue eyes, a brief, unintentional sigh, a momentary glance toward an object that lay forgotten on a side table. It was during one such morning that Catherine, while helping him with his tea, caught sight of a vintage wristwatch resting beside his plate. The watch, with its worn leather strap and slightly scratched face, exuded an unexpected elegance. It was an incongruous detail in the sterile luxury of his surroundings, yet it seemed to hold a story of its own. Sensing an opportunity to bridge the gap between them, Catherine leaned in gently and asked, "Sir, may I ask about your watch? It appears to be very dear to you." For a long, heavy moment, Victor said nothing. Then, in a voice softened by sorrow and edged with a deep-seated pain, he murmured, "It belonged to my late son, Emmanuel." The revelation struck Catherine like a quiet thunderclap. Emmanuel, a name that resonated with both love and irreparable loss, had once been the light of Victor's life, and his untimely departure had left an unfillable void. In that single, poignant confession, the icy distance that had long separated them began to thaw, revealing a vulnerable truth beneath Victor's stern exterior. Encouraged by this shared moment of raw emotion, Catherine listened as Victor recounted fragments of his past. He spoke haltingly of the gentle laughter of his son, of dreams that were left unfulfilled, and of the crushing grief that had forced him into a solitary existence. Each word was imbued with a melancholy that mirrored the quiet despair Catherine herself had long battled. In this intimate exchange, the two discovered that beneath their outward differences lay kindred spirits, both scarred by loss, and yet, in their own ways, still capable of hope. Their conversation was tender and unhurried, unfolding slowly in the soft light of the wintry afternoon, and it allowed both to begin the long, painful process of healing. Over the following days, the interactions between Catherine and Victor grew subtly more personal. Between the strict routines and clinical tasks, there were moments of shared silence, moments when their eyes met in understanding. Sometimes Victor would ask Catherine small questions about her own life, about the challenges of raising her son Mikey on her own, about the hardships she faced in her previous job, and she would reply with careful candor, drawing from years of quiet resilience. These conversations, though infrequent and measured, gradually chipped away at the walls that both had built around themselves. In the long, hushed corridors of the mansion, where every footstep echoed with the weight of isolation, a fragile bond began to form, nurtured by mutual understanding and the unspoken promise of renewal. The transformation was not instantaneous, but each small gesture carried enormous significance. When Victor's tone softened just a fraction while thanking Catherine for her help, or when a hint of a smile appeared on his face as he recalled a fond memory of Emmanuel, Catherine felt as though she were witnessing a miracle. These rare moments of vulnerability were like precious gems in a vast, cold expanse, small, but enough to kindle a hope that had long been dormant within them both. Outside, the winter deepened, and the world beyond the mansion's imposing walls grew colder. Yet within the confines of the estate, a quiet warmth began to emerge. The harsh rigidity of Victor's daily routine, once a symbol of his isolation and bitterness, now seemed less absolute as he gradually allowed himself to trust Catherine. Their interactions, initially governed by the strict protocols of care, evolved into genuine exchanges of personal history and unspoken feelings. Each conversation became a stepping stone towards healing, as both began to confront the raw pain of their pasts. For Victor, sharing the story of Emmanuel was not merely a recounting of sorrow, but a tentative attempt to reclaim the love and vulnerability he had long suppressed. For Catherine, listening to his reminiscences was a cathartic experience, one that validated her own struggles and affirmed her capacity to mend not only her life, but the broken spirit of the man before her. In these quiet, introspective moments, the mansion, with its grand halls and imposing architecture, began to reveal another side, a space where genuine emotion could be nurtured despite the trappings of wealth and power. The cold, impersonal corridors that had once seemed to mirror the emptiness of Victor's soul were now slowly being transformed by the infusion of kindness and understanding that Catherine brought with her every day. Each shared memory, each tender word, was a small act of defiance against the loneliness that had defined them for so long. As days turned into weeks, the fragile bond between caregiver and patient deepened. Catherine found herself not only fulfilling her duties with precision, but also longing to help Victor heal from the grief that had consumed him. In turn, Victor began to show signs of a man reawakened, hesitant smiles, gentle inquiries about Catherine's well-being, and an emerging willingness to discuss his lost love, Emmanuel, with a clarity that had long been absent. Their connection, built on shared vulnerability and the recognition of each other's resilience, slowly evolved into something more meaningful, a quiet, unspoken promise that perhaps, together, they could forge a path out of the darkness. One particularly brisk afternoon, as a soft snow began to fall outside, Catherine and Victor found themselves alone in a quiet sitting room. The light from a lone lamp cast long shadows across the room, and the muffled sound of snowflakes hitting the window pane provided a gentle, rhythmic backdrop. In that intimate space, the conversation took on a more personal tone. Victor, his voice low and reflective, recounted a memory of his son's laughter, a memory that brought tears to both their eyes. Catherine, her heart aching with empathy, reached out to gently squeeze his hand. In that silent moment, the years of isolation and bitterness seemed to recede, replaced by the promise of healing. It was then that both realized the power of a single shared moment of compassion, a moment that could begin to mend even the deepest wounds. In the lingering quiet of that wintry afternoon, as they sat together surrounded by the soft glow of the lamp, Catherine and Victor understood that their journey was only just beginning. The shared act of opening up about past sorrows had created a delicate bridge between two souls who had long suffered in silence. Their connection was fragile, yet it held the potential to transform their lives and, by extension, the cold, imposing mansion that had once symbolized only isolation and wealth. With each word spoken and every tear shed in that softly lit room, the promise of renewal grew stronger, a promise that even in the harshest winter of life, the seeds of compassion and genuine human connection could sprout a new, hopeful spring. As the weeks turned into months, the mansion itself began to change in subtle ways, mirroring the transformation unfolding in its inhabitants. The once sterile corridors, with their echoing footsteps and impersonal decor, now carried hints of warmth. A soft light here, a gentle conversation there. Catherine's unwavering compassion and tireless efforts to instill dignity in every interaction were slowly reshaping not only her own life, but also the atmosphere within the mansion. Even Victor, whose once impenetrable walls of bitterness had long isolated him, started to show signs of inner thaw. Every morning, after completing her demanding duties, Catherine would steal moments of quiet reflection by a grand window overlooking the mansion's frosted gardens. In those stolen instants, she allowed herself to dream of a future where the shadows of her past no longer dominated her thoughts. The chill of winter, ever present outside, contrasted with the emerging warmth that began to fill the large, echoing halls. It was in these moments that Victor's transformation was most evident. He would gaze out at the horizon with an expression that, for a brief second, softened from its habitual severity to reveal a glimmer of hope. It was as if the beauty of the awakening world outside had stirred something long dormant within him. One crisp afternoon, Catherine was summoned to Victor's private study, a quiet, secluded room filled with relics of a bygone era, the heavy drapes, dust motes dancing in the beam of a single table lamp, and faded photographs lined the walls, evoking memories of happier times. In this intimate setting, Victor hesitated before unfolding a yellowed envelope with trembling fingers. His voice, usually cold and detached, broke into a quiet confession as he began to read aloud the contents of a letter written by his late son, Emmanuel. The letter was a tender reminder of a time when hope and love had once lit up his life, before the crushing weight of loss had driven him into isolation. As Victor's soft, measured tones filled the room, Catherine listened in silent empathy. Each word he spoke carried the heavy burden of regret and longing, a reminder of a love that had been brutally taken from him. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes as she recalled her own losses and the loneliness that had once threatened to consume her. In that vulnerable exchange, the rigid professional boundaries that had once defined their relationship began to dissolve. For the first time, Victor allowed himself to be truly seen, not just as a paralyzed millionaire bound by duty, but as a father whose heart was shattered by the absence of his beloved son. Their conversation meandered through memories of happier days, of laughter shared and dreams nurtured, before the relentless tide of misfortune swept it all away. Victor's voice grew softer with each passing sentence, and Catherine felt as if the pain etched into his every word resonated with her own hidden sorrows. In that fragile moment, the mansion's cold, imposing exterior seemed to recede, replaced by the gentle hum of shared understanding and the promise of healing. They spoke of forgiveness, not as an abstract ideal, but as a tangible, necessary act that might allow both of them to reclaim some semblance of the lives they once knew. Outside the study, the mansion was quietly alive with renewed energy. The staff, inspired by Catherine's passionate advocacy for fairness and respect, began to interact with one another with a newfound sense of camaraderie. Long-neglected grievances were slowly being acknowledged, and small acts of kindness began to ripple through the previously rigid hierarchy. In hushed conversations during coffee breaks, employees expressed tentative hope that change was not only possible, but already underway. Catherine's influence had sparked a subtle yet powerful transformation, one that extended far beyond the confines of her own work. For Victor, the study session marked a turning point. The walls he had so meticulously built around his heart started to crumble, replaced by an earnest willingness to confront the pain he had long kept at bay. In quiet moments, he would find himself recalling the warmth of Emmanuel's laughter, the tenderness of shared glances, and the unspoken promises of a happier past. These recollections, though laced with sorrow, also carried a flicker of light, the possibility that he might, in time, learn to live with the loss rather than be defined by it. Catherine, too, was transformed by these moments of raw honesty. Each shared confession, every tear and every tentative smile exchanged with Victor, reinforced her belief that true healing could only come from genuine human connection. Her role as a caregiver had evolved from a desperate means of survival to a mission of rebuilding and renewal, not just for Victor, but for herself as well. In the quiet solitude of the mansion's study, she discovered reserves of strength and compassion that she had never known existed within her. The transformation was gradual and often painful, yet each step forward was a victory against the isolation and despair that had once seemed insurmountable. As the day gave way to a soft, starlit night, the study's gentle lamplight cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, blending memories of the past with the fragile hope of the future. Catherine and Victor sat in reflective silence, both acutely aware that the journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Yet, in that shared quiet, a bond was forged, a delicate, luminous thread of understanding that promised to carry them through even the darkest times. In that tender space, they silently vowed that the pain of loss and the bitterness of the past would not dictate their future. Instead, they would nurture the fragile spark of hope that had been ignited by shared vulnerability and the simple, transformative power of genuine human connection. Their conversation that night, filled with hushed confidences and soft sighs, was a turning point, a promise that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal when tended with compassion and understanding. And as the mansion's corridors lay silent and the soft whispers of the night filled the air, both Catherine and Victor knew that they were no longer prisoners of their past. In the quiet interplay of light and shadow, amidst the gentle echo of memories and the tender murmur of hope, they took their first tentative steps toward a future defined not by loss, but by the promise of renewal and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Over the ensuing months, the slow transformation that had begun in that dim study extended its gentle influence throughout the mansion, reshaping its atmosphere and the lives of all who dwelled within its walls. Every day, Catherine Evans worked tirelessly with a renewed sense of purpose that went far beyond her original duties. What had once been a role defined solely by routine care for the paralyzed millionaire, Victor Reynolds, now became a mission to restore not only his dignity, but also the humanity of the entire estate. The cold, echoing corridors that had long symbolized isolation began to fill with quiet whispers of hope and soft exchanges of genuine kindness. Even the mansion's staff, once resigned to a life of impersonal service, started to display a spark of warmth and camaraderie, inspired by Catherine's heartfelt insistence on treating everyone with respect and compassion. Catherine's efforts did not go unnoticed. In the break rooms and quiet corners of the mansion, the employees began to share their stories, tales of long, hard days, of personal struggles and small victories, and soon a culture of empathy and understanding emerged. The once stern routines gave way to moments of mutual support, where colleagues would exchange encouraging words and extend a helping hand without hesitation. Catherine organized informal gatherings, where the staff could talk freely and share ideas on how to make their daily lives more bearable, fostering a sense of belonging that had long been missing in the opulent but sterile environment. Victor Reynolds, for his part, was slowly awakening from his self-imposed isolation. The rigid walls of bitterness that had guarded his heart for so many years began to show cracks under the steady, compassionate pressure of Catherine's presence. In the quiet solitude of the mansion's mornings, he would sit by the grand windows, gazing out at the awakening gardens, and for a fleeting moment, a trace of a smile would cross his usually impassive face. His once impenetrable demeanor softened incrementally as he allowed himself to recall the happier memories of his past, fragments of a life filled with love and laughter that now seemed almost surreal. Every time Catherine would speak to him about her own struggles as a single mother or share a tender memory of her son Mikey, Victor felt an unfamiliar stirring of empathy. He began to ask gentle questions about her life and even expressed curiosity about her dreams for the future. One rainy afternoon, when the mansion's marble halls echoed with the pitter-patter of droplets on polished surfaces, Victor called Catherine to his study once again. This time, the conversation unfolded in an atmosphere that was palpably different from before. Victor, his voice softer and his gaze less guarded, confessed that the routine care had become less of a burden and more of a solace. a way to reconnect with a part of himself he had long thought dead. "Your presence," he murmured, "reminds me that there was once a time when I believed in love and kindness. I never thought I could feel that again." Catherine, moved by the vulnerability in his words, reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "We all deserve a chance to feel warmth, even in the darkest moments," she replied quietly, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. In that tender moment, both felt the invisible ties of healing weaving slowly through the tapestry of their battered souls. As weeks turned into months, the mansion underwent a remarkable metamorphosis. The policies that had long governed its operations were revised under Catherine's quiet insistence on fairness. Staff meetings were transformed into forums for open discussion, where grievances were aired and resolved with genuine care. The once haughty management, previously indifferent to the plight of the employees, began to implement changes that elevated the morale and dignity of everyone. These reforms, though gradual, created an atmosphere where even Victor's distant world of luxury started to blend with the warmth of human connection. Catherine herself emerged as a beacon of resilience and determination. In the quiet evenings after a long day's work, she would retreat to her modest apartment, not with a heart full of sorrow, but with one now buoyed by the knowledge that she was effecting change, both for herself and for those around her. Every small success, whether it was a sincere smile from a previously disillusioned coworker or a word of thanks from a supervisor, reinforced her belief that her life was on the cusp of a new beginning. Her son, Mikey, with his innocent laughter and unbreakable spirit, became the driving force behind her determination. She imagined a future where, despite the hardships of the past, they could finally live with dignity and hope. The ripple effects of these changes extended beyond the mansion's walls. Local community members, noticing the newfound warmth in the interactions among the mansion's staff, began to speak of the transformation in hushed, respectful tones. It was as if Catherine's actions had sown seeds of compassion that were now beginning to bloom throughout the community. Even those who had once looked down upon her, or whom she had once seen as emblematic of a callous world, now appeared in a softer, more human light. One particularly memorable evening, as a gentle snowfall blanketed the city, the mansion's grand dining hall became the stage for a quiet celebration. Under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, staff and a few local community members gathered to mark the progress they had made together. At a table set for two in a quiet corner of the hall, Victor and Catherine sat in a reflective silence. The air was thick with unspoken emotion and the promise of redemption. Victor's voice, when it finally emerged, was tinged with gratitude and vulnerability. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes glistening with tears. "Because of you, I have begun to believe that life can still hold beauty, even after all this loss." Catherine's gentle smile in response was a silent affirmation of the journey they had shared, one marked by hardship, but also by a rekindled hope for the future. As the celebration unfolded, the mansion itself seemed to breathe a little easier. The once cold and imposing edifice had become a sanctuary of compassion, where every corridor, every room echoed with the soft murmur of renewed life. It was clear to everyone present that the transformation had been gradual yet profound, a metamorphosis that was as much about the human spirit as it was about structural changes. The story of Catherine and Victor had become a testament to the idea that even after the deepest wounds, healing was possible through the power of genuine connection and empathy. That night, as the festivities wound down and the last echoes of laughter faded into the cool winter air, Catherine and Victor sat side by side, each lost in their own reflections. They both knew that the journey ahead was still long and fraught with challenges, but in that shared moment, they found solace in the knowledge that they were no longer alone. The past, with all its pain and betrayals, had given way to a new beginning, a future where true wealth was measured not in material possessions, but in the bonds of compassion, understanding, and hope. Time continued its inexorable march as winter slowly receded, and with the coming of early spring, the transformation that had taken root within the mansion and its inhabitants deepened further. Victor Reynolds, once a man encased in cold detachment and sorrow, now showed unmistakable signs of change. In the soft glow of dawn, he would sit by the expansive windows of his private study, watching as hints of green emerged from the frost-kissed gardens. With each passing day, the barriers that had long isolated him began to crumble under the gentle persistence of Catherine Evans' compassion and unwavering dedication. Catherine, too, had evolved during these trying months. What began as a desperate bid to secure a living had transformed into a mission of renewal, a quest not merely to survive, but to restore dignity and foster genuine human connections. Every day she took pride in her work, not only caring for Victor with meticulous attention, but also inspiring the mansion's staff to embrace a culture of empathy and respect. Meetings once filled with hushed complaints gave way to open conversations about the value of every individual, and slowly, the mansion itself began to echo with the warmth of human spirit rather than the chill of isolation. In quiet moments between her duties, Catherine often reflected on her own journey. Sitting in her modest apartment after long days at the mansion, she would recall the painful memories of abandonment and humiliation that had once defined her life. But now, those memories were interwoven with new experiences, moments of unexpected kindness, small victories that lit a spark of hope, and the steady, reassuring presence of Victor, who was learning to trust again. Her heart, once burdened by despair, now pulsed with cautious optimism and a fierce determination to build a better future for herself and her beloved son, Mikey. Victor, for his part, began to open up more. He started to share stories of his youth and fragments of his lost past, revealing a man who had once known love and laughter before the tragedies that reshaped his life took hold. During one particularly poignant afternoon, as the mansion's corridors were bathed in soft, natural light, Victor invited Catherine to join him for tea in a quiet sitting room adorned with cherished mementos. With a voice trembling slightly, he recounted the moments he had shared with his late son Emmanuel, a boy whose gentle spirit had once filled his life with meaning. As he spoke, Catherine listened intently, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that intimate exchange, the distance between them diminished further, forging a bond built on shared grief, understanding, and the mutual desire to reclaim what had been lost. The changes within the mansion were not confined solely to the interactions between Victor and Catherine. Inspired by her unyielding commitment, the mansion's management began to address long-ignored issues of staff morale and working conditions. Policies were revised, and a renewed focus on fairness and compassion was instituted. The once impersonal, hierarchical environment gave way to a more collaborative and caring atmosphere. Employees who had felt invisible and undervalued began to speak up, sharing ideas and experiences that fostered a renewed sense of community. Catherine's influence had set in motion a quiet revolution, a testament to the power of empathy to transform not only individual lives, but entire institutions. One bright spring afternoon, as the mansion's gardens blossomed with vibrant flowers and the air was filled with the scent of renewal, a celebratory event was organized by the local community to honor the progress made within the mansion. Friends, neighbors, and even some longtime staff members gathered in a quaint park to share in the joy of this transformation. Amid the soft murmur of heartfelt conversations and the gentle clinking of glasses, Victor and Catherine sat together at a table, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange of gratitude and hope. Victor, his voice soft and laden with emotion, said, I used to measure success by power and wealth, but now I see that true richness lies in the bonds we forge and the lives we touch. Catherine, her smile tender and genuine, replied, "Our journey has shown me that even in the darkest moments, a single act of kindness can spark a new beginning." Their words resonated with everyone present, as if the very air was charged with the promise of redemption and renewal. Yet, even as the celebrations lifted spirits and reaffirmed the possibility of a better future, both Catherine and Victor knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. The deep-seated wounds of their pasts could not be erased overnight, and the process of healing was slow and sometimes painful. But in the quiet moments, whether during a shared cup of tea or a reflective stroll through the mansion's newly vibrant corridors, they found solace in the small victories. A gentle smile, a kind word, or the warmth of a hand held in quiet solidarity. For Catherine, every day now was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The long nights filled with tears and self-doubt had gradually given way to mornings of quiet determination and hope. With each act of care she extended to Victor, and each change she helped foster among the staff, she reclaimed a piece of her dignity that had once seemed forever lost. The transformation within the mansion paralleled her inner metamorphosis, as the cold, unfeeling walls of her past began to melt into the soft glow of a future built on empathy, respect, and genuine connection. Victor, witnessing the profound impact of Catherine's compassion, found himself slowly rediscovering the ability to feel. The memories of his son, once shrouded in bitterness and regret, began to emerge not as a source of pain alone, but as a reminder of the love that had once filled his life. Each day, as he engaged in gentle conversations with Catherine, he felt the possibility of redemption stir within him, a chance to rebuild a semblance of the life he had lost. And in these shared moments, the mansion transformed from a cold symbol of isolation into a living, breathing community where hope and renewal were not just ideals, but attainable realities. As spring deepened and the days grew longer, the quiet revolution within the mansion continued to ripple outward, touching the lives of everyone who passed through its doors. The promise of change, nurtured by small acts of kindness and unwavering commitment, began to echo throughout the community, a reminder that even the most broken hearts could find solace, and that every new beginning was born from the courage to forgive, to love, and to embrace the future with open arms. By the time summer cast its warm glow over the transformed mansion, the culmination of Catherine's and Victor's arduous journeys had finally arrived. The once forlorn and isolated mansion now buzzed with life, a place where compassion and genuine human connection had replaced the cold veneer of opulence. Catherine Evans had not only secured a stable future for herself and her son Mikey, but had also become a beacon of hope and resilience for the entire community. Her transformation from a woman broken by betrayal and poverty into a leader who championed the dignity of every individual was nothing short of extraordinary. Victor Reynolds, once defined solely by his physical limitations and the bitterness of loss, had found a measure of redemption through Catherine's unwavering care and compassion. No longer was he the solitary, embittered millionaire confined to his wheelchair. He had begun to rediscover the beauty of vulnerability, the healing power of shared sorrow, and ultimately, the possibility of new beginnings. His transformation resonated deeply within him, as he acknowledged that true wealth was not measured in material possessions, but in the capacity to love, to forgive, and to connect with others on a profoundly human level. The mansion itself stood as a testament to this transformation. Its once cold, impersonal halls had been infused with a warm, welcoming energy that echoed the renewed spirit of its inhabitants. Policies were reformed, and the staff, emboldened by Catherine's leadership, had come together as a community, one that celebrated not just success in business, but the intrinsic value of every individual. The ripple effects of these changes extended far beyond the mansion's walls, touching the broader local community and inspiring a collective reevaluation of what it meant to truly care for one another. In a quiet ceremony held in the mansion's newly renovated lobby, friends, neighbors, and even some former skeptics gathered to celebrate the remarkable journey of transformation. As soft music played in the background and the light filtered gently through large windows, Victor and Catherine sat side by side, reflecting on the long and painful road that had brought them to this moment. Their eyes met in a silent, powerful exchange, a mutual recognition that the anguish of the past had given way to a future filled with promise. Victor, his voice tinged with both gratitude and humility, spoke softly. "I used to believe that power and wealth defined a man, but now I understand that true richness lies in the relationships we nurture and the love we share." Catherine, her eyes bright with renewed purpose, replied, "Our journey has taught me that even in the darkest moments, a single act of kindness can ignite hope and transform everything." Their words, simple yet profound, resonated deeply with everyone present, serving as a reminder that even the most shattered lives can be rebuilt through compassion and perseverance. In the days that followed the ceremony, the positive changes continued to ripple outward. The mansion's staff flourished under the new atmosphere of respect and collaboration, and Catherine's advocacy for fairness inspired local outreach programs aimed at supporting the underprivileged. Victor's story of redemption became a quiet beacon of hope, a living testament to the power of human connection to heal even the deepest wounds. As summer gradually gave way to the gentle embrace of autumn, Catherine and Victor found themselves standing together on the mansion's front steps, looking out at a world that now seemed filled with possibility. The trials of the past, the bitterness of betrayal, the loneliness of neglect, had been transformed into a legacy of hope, renewal, and genuine human connection. Together, they vowed to continue building a future where the true measure of success was found not in money or status, but in the depth of one's compassion and the bonds forged through shared experiences. And so, in the final, transformative chapter of their journey, Catherine Evans and Victor Reynolds embraced the truth that had emerged from the crucible of their hardships, that every new beginning is born from the courage to love, to forgive, and to rise again despite the storms of life. Their lives, once marred by loss and isolation, had been rewritten by compassion, and their legacy would forever serve as a reminder that true wealth lies in the enduring strength of the human spirit. As they stepped forward into the future, hand in hand, the mansion and its people glowed with the quiet promise of a brighter tomorrow, a tomorrow defined by empathy, mutual support, and the transformative power of genuine connection.